Yo, thanks for checking out the Affecting Our Altruism podcast. This show brings you the voices of people who are taking on some of the biggest problems of our time. Some of them are informed by the principles of effective altruism, while some have a different take. All of them care deeply about making the world a better place. Brad West has thought deeply about how consumer power can be used to directly accomplish social good, instead of as a means to promoting economic development generically. In the profit for good model, which he has championed, a company's profits are directed straight to philanthropic causes. This shift can transform how businesses operate, in my mind, at virtually no cost, which is the crazy part. The possible social benefit of reorganizing philanthropy is frankly quite stunning. So I'm excited that Brad has had a chance to come on today. Brad has a side full-time job as an attorney. So we're grateful that he's taken the time to join us today. Have a listen. Welcome, Brad, to the Affecting Our Altruism podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing all right, Elliot. How about yourself?
I'm really great. Really excited to talk to you. I've been following your work for a few months now, Brad, and also had a few conversations with you. And I'm really excited to let the world know about what you're up to and also the person behind the organization as well. First, I'd like to kind of start with the main message. What is Profit for Good, the Profit for Good initiative?
Yeah, there are a few examples of profit for good businesses. One people in the United States might know about is Newman's Own, which was started by Paul Newman and sells a bunch of different food products. Another example is Patagonia, which sells a bunch of fashionable clothing. But the defining feature of a profit for a good business is that the vast majority of the shareholder position is held by charities, or the benefit of the company. You know how companies have shareholders typically, and how businesses work is they pay their employees, they have other expenses and generate revenue. And the profit is the revenue minus the costs. So the shareholders in most companies provide the initial capital for the business, or they buy the stock from an existing stockholder, but they aren't otherwise involved in the business. So basically, in a charitable foundation, they get the benefit from the profits that a business generates instead of random shareholders. And why I think that is a pretty powerful tool is that if you look at other ways that businesses do good, sometimes a business might have a more environmentally friendly process, or it might source it more ethically, it might pay things. These things about how a business operates tend to add costs to the product or have other drawbacks. But just by having a charity or a charitable foundation be in the ownership position, it doesn't tend to increase costs at all. You can imagine a philanthropist buying out a business, putting it in a charitable foundation, and then advertising that, hey, if you buy from us instead of our competitor, you can help save lives from malaria, you can help save the environment, and that wouldn't tend to increase costs or have a drawback from the business perspective.
Whoa, this sounds like an innovation to me. Yeah, thanks for telling me a little bit about what Profit for Good model is. Sounds like a rethinking of the way organizations and businesses are structured that helps the world in a really obvious way, instead of, oh, money is good, so more money is good. It's just actually aligning companies' interests with social good, social interests, pro-social interests, like directly confronting. Does that sound right?
Yeah, what's really great about it is the mechanism by which profit for good does good is by doing what corporations or businesses naturally do, which is maximizing profit. In a lot of contexts, people think about that, characterize businesses as being bad for doing this. But with a profit for a good business, if your profit is translating to saving kids from malaria or helping to end factory farming or save our environment, then maximizing shareholder value is how you do good. So it takes what businesses naturally do and makes good of it.
How did you get involved with this kind of work?
Yeah, I would have to go back to when I'd heard about effective altruism. I think I heard about it with an interview of Will McCaskill on Sam Harris's podcast. And what was just so amazing to me was how much good effective charities could do. Just like hearing how, for instance, the Against Malaria Foundation could save someone's life for, on average, $5,000 or something. And just thinking about, like, if me or my loved one, like, it costs like $5,000 to get some sort of medical procedure to save their life, or, we would do everything we could. And it's just obvious to me that human lives are extremely valuable and effective charities. And that's what inspired me to try to give as much as I could and try to donate as much as I could. And I've always tried to think about things from an economics perspective. I've always really enjoyed thinking about incentives and how we can set things up. I was going to an effective altruism Chicago meetup, and I'm a lawyer. I do personal injury, workers' compensation, some small business claims. And I was passing out my business card, and I made them an offer. If you engage our services for like personal injury, workers' compensation claim, whatever, I would get a cut of the commission. I would get a third of the commission, and I would make a deal with them. The entirety of my cut, I'll donate to charity. And then a light bulb went off in my head. People are spending money and generating profits through their economic activity every day. People are generating thousands of dollars on an annual basis, and the people that are benefiting from that are random shareholders. I don't have a problem with random shareholders, but I would just much rather, if the money from my purchase, especially if I didn't have to pay anything more, or if I didn't have to, give up some feature or get a worse quality product, if the money from my purchase could save someone's life instead of enriching a shareholder, I would do it. And I don't think that would just be me that would do that. I think just about anyone would, provided that there was a clear choice to them. So we have here kind of one way that we get money for effective charities. The main one is through donation. And donation is great. Being part of the effective altruism community, I tried to donate as much as I could. But it's, for worse, I was going to say for better or for worse, but I'd say it's for worse. People don't donate significant sums of their money. And we try to get them to. I'm going to take the Giving What We Can pledge, and I'm going to try to, give as much as I can. But people don't donate a significant portion of their money. But if we could give people the choice to not give something up, but buy the same stuff that they're already going to and potentially save a life by just buying through one.
How is donating to a charity different from buying a service or product from a profit for good company?
Yeah. So when someone donates to a charity, and I love donating, I think it's one of the best things you can do with your money is donating to it may be the best thing you can do with your money to donate to effective charities. But a lot of people in developed countries don't do it for one reason or another. They feel like they need to save money for their family. It involves a sacrifice. And for better or for worse, people don't donate to effective charities, even though it could do a tremendous amount of good. However, if you buy through a profit for a good business, you're not giving anything up. If you're buying a product that you already want, a profit for a good business has charities in the shareholder position instead of having normal shareholders and then just adding on a cost for the donation. There isn't a reason to think that the product would cost more or be of worse quality. So what the profit for a good model enables people to do is it enables them to fund charities. It enables them to save lives, save the planet, help end factory farming, any number of these wonderful things that effective charities do without giving something up personally. That's sort of what I think the magic of profit for good is. You can make a difference, a big difference, by funding effective charities without making personal sacrifice.
Wow. This story of you going to this meetup in Chicago and handing out your business card is really a picture I'd like to hear more from. So you essentially just came up with this idea in your head where I do commission-based work. I also would like to do good with my efforts. When you say it's at no cost, would that have, if you gave your commission to a charity, how would that work? Like, for example, if some local person said they'd like some help with lawyer help, and you helped them out, and you got paid X plus Y, and Y being the commission, and Y, instead of going to your pocketbook, it goes to a charity of their choice. Does that sounds like it comes at a cost to you, the service provider?
Yeah, and that would be true of profit for good businesses. For somebody like for instance, if I get more business, then if I'm giving my contingency fee or one third of the contingency fee, I'm giving something up. But the key thing is the client isn't. The client is getting the exact same thing for the exact same price. So yeah, with profit for good businesses, there is an entity that has to give something up, and those would be the people that are basically creating the profit for good possibility. So if you had philanthropists, fund an initial profit for good business, then, they'd have to provide the seed funds for it. Or if you have, profit for good business, sort of like what I'd be doing as an attorney, yeah, there would be that. It's just my case is that, but because of what it enables for the other economic actors. So, like consumers are one of the other economic actors, employees are another one of the other economic actors, business partners could be another economic actor. Basically, it enables them to support charities without personal sacrifice. Like if I decide to work for a business and I'd rather work for this one for the profit for a good business instead of its competitor, then I can get better talent. If I'm a store and I want to give better shelf space to laundry detergent that's from a profit for a good business, so I'm like, oh, I have a partnership with this business that's helping prevent malaria, that's saving the environment. That has value to the business partner, so the business partner may do it. What I call this is charity choice. Basically, the fact that people have a non-zero preference for, say, saving a kid from malaria or saving the environment versus enriching a random investor. So basically, these non-zero preferences from economic actors would give the profit for good business an edge. And in financial terms, let's imagine that we have $100 million normal business. Say that it sells ketchup, right? If you just had a normal investor that was looking to buy that, maybe they would have to pay something like an acquisition premium. So, but in any case, to simplify it a bit, the normal investor would kind of get what they pay for. The normal investor has $100 million cash, they pay $100 million to the company, and then they have $100 million in equity in the business. The theory of profit for good essentially is that charity choice, which is basically the discrimination in favor of charities of all these economic actors like consumers, employees, the other business partners. So they have $100 million plus $50 million. I don't know. The fact that people rather buy from that and work for that rather than the competitors has a monetary value. And that means that philanthropists can basically multiply their money by leveraging, these sort of non-zero economic preferences, charity choice.
Yeah, charity choice. It enables a cultural preference creation for actually us doing things that we want to see happen in the world. So this sounds, yeah, Brad. Every time I hear you talk about this stuff, I just see you like come alive with like the ideas are just speaking through you like that gospel. I see your passion in this, and it's just infectious. And you've written about this on your blog. You've been building this idea around this light bulb moment, and I'm just thrilled to see it. I'd like to learn more about you. How do you keep motivated and make time to work on this stuff? How do you do this? You're a lawyer, you're full time, and you're also starting this idea from light bulb stage to what it is now. How do you stick with it?
It's very challenging. Working as a lawyer is intellectually straining and draining, and I try to put my extra hours. What sort of helps me go through it is just thinking about the potential good that this could do and how much sense it makes. Basically, if people had the opportunity to buy something and help save the world, I think it's a no brainer. And I think if there's a chance that through my efforts, this could help make a world where, you know, people can pursue their dreams. People living on aren't living on $2 a day. There aren't animals that are being tortured for our consumption. And just thinking if there's some way that I can use my idea to help, I just want to push as much as I can and see what I can do. Like I'm just like one person of, I don't know what, 8 billion humans now and hundreds of billions of conscious beings. If I, one person, make a systemic change that can enable the betterment of people and animals today and tomorrow, I just want to do everything that I can. So, yeah, I think that because of my belief in the idea, I just feel like I have to push as much as I can.
Yeah, that's a theme I see in the effective altruism community is like identifying something enormous and giant and having the perspective to say, I'm just a small part of this. And then, like, but still, if I take it at a high level, perhaps the one little drop in the ocean can color the whole pool.
Yeah, I think it's sort of the ratio between an individual as a moral patient and potentially an individual as an agent. Just like you're just one among so many conscious beings, but you as the agent, you can use your resources, especially if you're in a developing country, you can use your ideas to help so many other beings. So I think that as your relation to what you are as an agent of doing good is much larger than you are as a patient. As a patient, we all have subjective experiences. We have pain, we have pleasure. Me, you, everybody, we're essentially morally deserving of consideration by other actors. And as agents, we are ourselves actors. We do things. We try to make the world a better place. We sometimes do things that make the world a worse place. And just considering how small our sort of patienthood interest is in relation to our power as agents is what just kind of makes me want to give everything that I can.
Oh wow, that's another like dimension of it is that we people with privilege and power have a lot more of that than like a subjective experience. It's like we can create so much more good than we are, like simply like by practicing some degree of effectiveness in our giving or in our work.
Yeah.
Patience versus agency.
Yeah, that would be moral philosophy. It would be basically someone, someone capable of being treated, moral, being given moral consideration, like someone that,
Like a skateboard doesn't have moral patience. It doesn't factor into our view of like who deserves like what.
I mean, there's panpsychism, so some people would be saying that the skateboard is, but yeah, most people think that. I don't think the skateboard minds being when you ride it around, Elliot.
The moral patience versus agency thing gets me like, okay, so there's so much agency in the world. That agency is a resource. Agency is where things can be activated and leveraged to respond to any moral questions and philosophies that you want to approach it with. So then what comes out of this is how do we make sure that all the agents, and I think what Profit for Good does is Profit for Good looks at all the agents, which is the entire consumer world, buying consumer side of the world, all the agents, what if those were aligned to the patients? And so like there was a symmetry between that. That could be just like a leveling, a great leveling that a model like this could accomplish.
Yeah. Well, I think that consumers, these other economic actors that have to do with whether a business are successful are aligned to some degree, right? If I'm with another effective altruist, for instance, then I have a very high degree of alignment. We're sort of working together. But even with just like a normal Joe who isn't going to donate anything, who's just sort of minding his business, I bet the average Joe is like, well, I could help save a kid from malaria, or I could help, enrich a random investor, and it's no skin off my teeth either way because I'm buying the thing already. We're aligned with Joe too. And I think that a lot of what we focused on in effective altruism, and this is great, is activating agents that are extremely aligned with us. And that's a good use of resource. But it's also hitting a much narrower subset of the population. Like we can only get, 10,000 or whatever people that are really aligned. But if we can hit the billions of people who are imperfectly aligned with us, then we can potentially have much larger impact. So profit for good is about sort of leveraging the imperfect alignment of billions of people all around the world. The fact that, hey, all else being equal, I'd rather save a kid from malaria. All else being equal, I'd rather save the environment for future generations. All else being equal, I'd rather a chicken wasn't tortured. And I think that it's really powerful. We've got to create the infrastructure for it. We've got to, look at there's got to be the opportunity for people to do that. This might be a good time to talk about how I think we get to that world.
Sure, go for it.
So what I think is actually the limiting factor right now is the fact that these opportunities are pretty limited. There are very few profit for good businesses out there in relation to market share, and there aren't really that many organizations. There's not much money going to inform people about it. So I think that we live in a world where there's trillions of dollars going to grow normal for-profit businesses, because with normal for-profit businesses, investors are constantly looking for how can I grow my own money. But profit for good businesses, there isn't really right now a natural group that's growing it, because philanthropists would be interested in doing it, but they typically donate directly to causes. So I think what we need to do at this point is provide extremely compelling evidence to philanthropists that this is a way that we can multiply your dollars to charity. And so that's why what the Profit for Good initiative is focusing on right now is starting strategic profit for good businesses. So the idea of a strategic profit for good business is, where can we create a no-brainer opportunity for consumers? Where can we make it very clear that, hey, you're buying this product versus that product, they're almost exactly as, if not exactly the same, and you're paying the same cost, so you're not giving anything up. And where can we do that with reasonable capital costs?
So there's a strategic initiative that is allowing investors and philanthropists to see it in action. Is that right?
Yeah.
Let's hear about it.
So what we're doing is we are looking to partner with life insurance agents. And the idea is that we provide them referrals in exchange for a commitment to donate a portion of the commissions that are generated. So what happens with life insurance sales is an agent gets like 60 to 80% of the first year's annualized premium if they sell a policy. And that could take a few sessions that are like a half hour or an hour session. So basically, what an agent does is they get on the phone, they talk to you, they figure out your family's needs in terms of protection or whatever, and they sell you a policy. And that can often generate hundreds to thousands of dollars, because a substantial policy could cost you two, three, $4,000 something. If it's a couple that's getting it, that could generate basically thousands of dollars for an hour or so of work. And the limiting factor for most agents is how many sales they can make. They spend most of their time not on these calls in which they're structuring a policy that makes sense, but rather they're making cold calls to people, or there's a list of possible. But my idea with commissions for a cause is, hey, what if we gave people the opportunity to buy products that they're already buying for the same price, and get a few hundred or $1,000 to charities at no extra cost to you? And that's what we're looking to do with commissions for a cause. And we're working with some agents now, and we're getting that finalized. And we're looking to market that opportunity to people in Illinois. If people have the opportunity to, right now we're looking at initiatives that would help in global health and development. So that might be like malaria charities, maybe the Malaria Consortium or the Against Malaria Foundation. And we're also looking into some animal welfare charities as well. People would be able to buy life insurance products, and they can see that it's the same product. They can see that it's the same price, and fund, charities help better the world at no extra cost to them.
So you're telling me that sometime in the near future, there's going to be a life insurance salesperson or team who are selling the same product, but somehow their profits are going towards either preventing people from dying of infectious disease or preventing animals from being tortured in small cages? Is this real?
Yeah, it's called Commissions for a Cause. And yeah, I'm really excited about it too, not just because I can raise some money for some really great causes, but I think that if people have the opportunity to fund charities while buying what they're already buying at the same price, they'll do it. and we can use this as evidence so that we can grow it. In the world, there are like $8 to $10 trillion or something or more of annual profits that are being generated. If just a small portion of that could be going toward where it could do the most good, we could end poverty. We could end extreme poverty. You should look at Natalie Cargill's TED Talk. She's the founder of Longview Philanthropy, and she talked about what could be achieved if the top 1%, the global 1%, gave 10% of their income. And also, I think it was something, there was a wealth tax component to it. But basically, with really, really big amounts of money going to charities, the sort of outcomes that we could achieve are just enormous. I realize I kind of jumped ahead there, but I think that if we can demonstrate the power of this, I really think that we just need to get philanthropists to be using this to leverage their money.
This is a podcast where we could jump to the moon and back, okay? This is where we could talk about what we're excited about, and you can get a little crazy with what you're excited about here. This is totally that place. Why life insurance sales? Why not anything else like a commodity good? Tell me about the choice of that particular type of business that you chose to do this commissions for a cause project start with.
Yeah, I think life insurance can be extremely lucrative if you can manage to capture a larger portion of sales than competitors. So if you're in this area and you really succeed, you can make a lot of money. It's also not as differentiated. Well, there's differentiation in terms of whether an agent is the best at identifying the policies that make sense for you. But in terms of the actual policies themselves, they're legibly identical. So one of the concerns with profit for good businesses is even if two items are the same price, but one is saying, hey, if you buy this one instead of buying the other, money goes to charity, is people will think there's some sort of hidden cost. One of the things about social entrepreneurship is sometimes there is a cost to buying the pro-social product. Sometimes if I buy the one that's better for the environment, it costs me a little bit more. The coffee, maybe if I buy the laundry detergent that's more eco-friendly, maybe there's a cost in terms of performance.
The top shelf stuff, that seventh generation stuff on the top
Yeah,
shelf. So you're telling me that you're somehow profit for good is breaking that expectation because of the way that the organization is structured. It doesn't incur additional cost.
how the good is done is by the shareholder identity and not through the operations. There isn't a reason that it would, but the problem is consumers may still have the perception that there's a trade-off. I think that there is a big perception that you don't get anything for free. So even though this seems to be a context in which from the consumer or other economic actor perspective, you could kind of get the ability to do good for free. But that's why it's important to identify contexts in which the identical nature of the products is legible so that there isn't a question, oh, if I'm buying this one that's being branded as more virtuous or being branded as doing good, that I'm secretly paying some hidden cost in terms of quality. So that was another factor in choosing life insurance sales, the fact that the products are legibly identical. And finally,
Are you going to be releasing the identity of this or these life insurance brokers as part of making the case for profit for good, or will it be like a secret type of thing? In other words, would you like anybody in the audience who lives in Chicago to call this number now, whoever it is, or would you like the public to play it cool and like see how it goes? What's your ask of the world for this specific one?
yeah, as of the recording of this podcast, the agent is very excited to work with us. He's still confirming with his carriers that there aren't any issues with him and his contract. And then once that's done, which may be by the time of the release of this podcast, I'd be happy to share, the agent that we're working with and the agents that we work with as the program develops.
Okay. Wow. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. We would be happy to put that information in the show notes whenever it's available. So that's one project that's going on with Profit for Good. Can you tell me about any other existing Profit for Good companies that you mentioned Newman's Own, you mentioned Patagonia. Are there any others that excite you and are doing well?
Yeah, there are a couple that I'd love to mention. Perhaps the most impressive example of a profit for good actually might be Humanitics, which is a ticketing business that, if you're an event organizer, you've got to sell tickets to your events. You can do it through Ticketmaster, but if you go through Humanitics, 100% of the profits go to different projects in the developing world. They've had like educational projects in the developing world. They recently gave a $4 million unrestricted donation to The Life You Can Save, which is Peter Singer's organization.
I do not need any more reasons to not use Ticketmaster. Like, if I could not use Ticketmaster, I would love to. Humanitics.
They're the fastest growing ticketing platform in the world. So I think that people who are organizing events, if they see, hey, I could have Ticketmaster, that which everybody loves, be the thing that does the ticketing, they might have a hard time choosing Ticketmaster over Humanitics, where not only the people, who are buying the ticket can say, hey, I, the fees or whatever they're going to this aren't going to some, shareholders, but they're going to help end poverty. They're going to help better the world. It's really a no-brainer context. And what's interesting is in the few years that they've been around, I believe that their valuation would be based on their revenue. It would be between $300 and $500 million. So it really does make the financial case for profit for good. The people who did the initial seed costs for Humanitics, in a few years, and again, this is a successful example, but I think that it is a strong empirical case. You can get potentially hundreds of millions of dollars to help when you give people the choice to help without giving something up.
So if I'm curious about the example of Humanitics or something like it from the perspective of an investor. Say somebody who wants to invest money and get a profit for themselves, like as you mentioned, like a random investor. Is it possible, or first of all, is it possible for a random investor to invest there and expect profit, or would it be more like a random quote unquote investor is a philanthropist? Like, I am going to invest quote unquote $1,000 in the growth of this company, and hopefully it will produce $1,000 worth of social good rather than money back to me. So as an investor, I guess my question is, what is the role of an investor in the profit for good model? Random money person.
There could be a role for a normal investor funding a business through debt instruments. So if you wanted to be a normal investor, get a return on your money potentially, you couldn't get too much equity, only like 10% by how I define a profit for a good business. So how you could support them is potentially offering bonds to the business or getting bonds in exchange for funding. So you would get return or no return if you were looking to have a somewhat donative role of your investment too. But that would be how a normal investor, a non-philanthropist, could potentially fund profit for a good business by using debt rather than equity.
Brad, because you sounds like you're making a lot of people happy by like having a seat at the table for even people who are looking for making a profit, a non-donative product.
If there was one other profit for a good business that I really wanted to mention, and that was Boas, and that's a company in the Netherlands that is selling used or vintage. They prefer the term vintage jeans, and 100% of the profit goes toward give well recommended charities. So that helps save lives in the developing world. And that seems very promising to me because they offer people the ability to save the environment by buying vintage rather than new. And, they can buy jeans on the same terms that they could with a normal for-profit. So I'm really excited about their work too. I think that's a pretty intuitive proposition that's worth testing. But a lot of the times it seems like what people want is they want you to already have proof of something, even though there's got to be some initial to prove it. And I mean, I think that there is. I think Humanitics is very strong evidence. I think they probably have if we went by their revenue, they'd be worth between 2 and 500 million from what I indicated. Yeah, I think the more that we can demonstrate that, the more philanthropists will be interested in growing it. as an area, like people that are funding charities, if they could get, instead of $1 million to charity, if they could get 2 million, I think that that's something they want to do. I just think that they're very conservative about that because they want to make sure that their money makes an impact. So that's why I think these sort of smaller scale things like commissions for a cause can help demonstrate, hey, if we give people the opportunity, people will want to do it. Another thing that I think, if I could talk for a minute about the Profit for Good initiative, the nonprofit that I founded, what I want to do is sort of create a movement around Profit for Good businesses, create like a logo that people can recognize. The problem with Profit for Good businesses marketing is if they're marketing their Profit for Good status, they're not marketing other aspects of their business. But for instance, the Profit for Good initiative were to engage in a marketing campaign, let people know, hey, if you buy something with this logo on it, you're helping save lives, you're helping better the environment at no extra cost. That's a very cheap way for them to advance their marketing, because there would be a sort of central campaign that potentially lots of different businesses worldwide could reference and benefit from. It's what you sort of see is there aren't even the Profit for Good businesses that are out there. They're kind of doing their own thing. But I think that if they were, sort of saying, hey, we're part of a group of businesses, we're part of a movement that is enabling the consumers, enabling the employees, enabling the people of the world to buy in a way that saves lives, I think that would be a really strong message. And yeah, and what I love about BOAS is that's Vincent Vanderholst also did a TEDx talk on Profit for Good, and he's really trying to push the message, just as we is Profit for Good as a movement. I would really love to see other Profit for Good businesses sort of unify around this message, because I think that they're offering such a powerful choice to people. But I think that consumers aren't really
Yeah.
seeing it
I
easily.
think it's having a legible brand around this type of business structure, organization structure is like could have a really improvement in like building trust around like how do these things really work, and having an advocate in this model such in yourself is really an asset towards the kind of change that could really make a difference in consumerism and how people buy things and sell things. I, for one, for my coaching practice, have committed to myself to my coaching practice to be a Profit for Good company. I would be more than happy to donate my profits above a living wage threshold to a charity, and to say that in advance. Like I believe that these organizations are doing incredible work, and I don't need too much to live on and to be happy and have a healthy lifestyle and for my family. So for me, like the Profit for Good
Yeah.
model is like, yeah, for sure. I would like to donate money anyway. And it being the fruits of my labor actually aligns my donations with my work.
Yeah. And see, this is a way that you can make your giving go further, because you could just have like a normal business and donate the profit. But by telling people, hey, if you get your coaching through me instead of getting your coaching through another guy, you may be able to get more business. So that enables your donation to go further, because you're leveraging it off of people like me who are like, hey, yeah, I could use some coaching. I have limited time. I'm trying to make the most use of it. I'm trying to get an outside perspective on how I can solve health problems, solve business problems, conduct myself more effectively. And yeah, I'm bettering the world the same way I
Yeah.
want to with my own money.
And whereas I think it's the differentiating factor is a nice thing for my business to have. Like when I'm talking to people about coaching, yeah, I'll mention that I'm a Profit for Good, but I think it's like almost like it, it's it's not all. It doesn't mean that I have a lesser product than the next person. It's simply that ultimately I'm doing this work. The worst thing that could happen is that some really good thing happens. The worst thing that could happen is some people the fees that they that they pay partially go towards an effective charity. And the best thing that can happen is that also happens, and the value is created in the work that we do in the coaching room. Yeah,
And
which is good.
honestly, it sends a very important signal to me as a client because I want to be working with a coach who understands my values and understands my alignment. And nothing communicates that to me stronger than you committing, what you make from this to charities. So it means a lot to me, and I am really happy for the sessions, and it's been incredible. It's been great getting an outside perspective, sort of looking at the problems. If I come into it some kind of abstractly, where I bring something up, you come up with sort of daily a date that I'm supposed to do X or whatever, and you really operationalize my problems. You validate how I feel about a particular issue and help me deal with it in a way that's more productive. I honestly can't emphasize how helpful you've been to me as a coach
Wow. Thanks,
enough.
Brad. This conversation slowly slid into a plug for my coaching work. But I'm here to talk with people like you, Brad. This conversation's about you and how you're taking a beautiful message, a beautiful idea, and you're putting your all into it. And see that happen with you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I'm really glad that you're putting a spotlight on people in the effective altruism movement. And I'm really hoping you can make some connections with people. There are lots of people with lots of creative ideas, with lots of different ways of approaching things. And I think that bringing people together with the effective altruism movement is how we together can do a lot more good.
Wow. And on that note, I want to thank you, Brad, for being on the show today. And thanks for coming out and sharing what you got with us.
It's really an honor. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how your podcast develops.
Our guest today has been Brad West. What a guy. Thanks for those kind words, Brad. I always like hearing from someone who's absolutely thought through their vision. It's like it's already here, Like it's manifested. I mean, like my business is a profit for good company. After I clear a living wage, at least 90% of my profits will go to charities. Like my family doesn't need more than that. I'll share more on that in a blog post. For all you business owners out there, I'd like you to think about what you stand for. And if you think it's possible that your customers would be able to guess at what that is. Supporting the Profit for Good initiative, in my mind, is a radical move. For philanthropies, it's the ultimate charity fundraiser. For businesses, it's added value to your product or service. And for consumers, it's an easy way to just make a little difference in the world. So go have a look-see at the Profit for Good website, profitforgood.org, the number 4 in it, because they're cool. I'll link in the show notes. And that's all my take. That's me. However, this podcast is a truth-seeking podcast. And if you're listening to this and you disagree with what we say here, if you have a different point of view, I'd love to hear you out and keep this conversation going. Brad has heard a lot of the objections that people have raised in his really out-of-the-box way of thinking. He's written about it on the Effective Altruism Forum, on his blog, elsewhere. Before you come at me with objections or disagreements, please check out what he's written. He's done a lot of work on this stuff. And we're really excited that I'm really excited that they're running a program this summer called which we talked about, the Commissions for a Cause project, with a life insurance salesperson who will be donating a good portion of their profits to charity and having that be part of their own selling point. So we're gonna keep our eyes on what they're doing. Please keep us posted, Brad and the team. And we'd love to hear more later in the season about what they're learning, what's going well, what mistakes they might be making, and what we can all learn from what they're doing. For those of you interested in receiving coaching services from me, check out my website, elliottbillingsley.com, which is linked in the show notes. And one more thing before I go, y'all. Part of how we are measuring success of our podcast is how much attention and donation money we direct towards the organizations we feature. So please either donate through the link or donate some other way, and be sure to tell them that the Affecting Our Altruism podcast sent you. You can find the dedicated link in the show notes. And it is tax deductible in the United States. Well, that's enough from me, y'all. Thank you so much for listening.